Hello, and welcome to Career STEM Chats.
Kori Rahaim brings more than 2 decades of experience at the intersection of science, strategy, and people. She is the Senior Vice President and Head of People and Business Operations for the 459 Initiative at 5am Ventures, where she's been shaping how organizations grow and lead since 2021. Her career has spanned biotech, pharmaceuticals, and venture capital, with a consistent focus on building thoughtful, high-performing teams. Before joining 5am, Kori played a key role at Relay Therapeutics, helping guide the company from its early startup days into clinical stage organization, all while supporting an expanding oncology pipeline and aligning strategy with business goals. Earlier, at the Novartis Institute for Biomedical Research, she served as a global HR leader and a trusted partner across a range of therapeutic areas, from neuroscience to ophthalmology, working closely with leadership teams to navigate growth and change. She began her career at the Straumann Group, where she led talent acquisition and supported operations and manufacturing. And now, in our conversation, Kori reflects on what it takes to build resilient organizations, support innovation at scale, and lead with intention in an ever-evolving industry. Here's our chat with Kori.
Thank you so much, Kori, for joining us tonight. Because of all people, I thought your career has been so interesting to me, because you've been in pharma, in biotech, and in venture, all in the STEM community. So my first question is, why? Why didn't you do something else? What was the attraction to STEM?
Yeah, I think it's one, I feel super humbled and privileged to work in this industry and with these types of, people, scientists and engineers and folks in healthcare are really an extraordinary bunch. And so one, being an HR and people person, working alongside folks that are naturally curious and always so excited and willing to share about what their work is, and even down to talking to me about different types of cell types. I still have a notebook that I carry around with me to this day. When I get to be immersed in scientific meetings, I do write notes down, and always, I just love the type of people that are in this field. And of course, I think like anyone who's been in healthcare, biotech, or pharma, being able to work with a mission-driven organization is just so rewarding. Sometimes we are literally years away from the clinic or, being able to have an impact for patients, but still, even in the early stage days, the passion and excitement is always palpable. And, personally, I think many of us have, unfortunately, folks that are in our, loved ones who are either here or not on this planet anymore and impacted by disease. And so, again, being able to spend my time working with folks like this, supporting folks like this, has been truly, really what keeps me going, and why I couldn't work in any other industry at this point in my career.
Oh, I love that. And, I feel the same way. As a non-scientist, I really do I feel privileged,
Yes.
right? Because the work that they're doing is awesome. All
I
right.
will say my claim to fame, though, is I've had a few folks recently say, "Oh, what type of scientist are you?" or "What did you
Oh,
study?" And so I am always, I think after all these years of sitting in discovery meetings and like down to that and just asking questions and being curious, I'm always super flattered when people even think I might have even gotten like my bachelor's in some type of scientific discipline. So
that's
yeah, my
awesome.
recent, accolade I've added.
That is awesome. So let's start with your first, because you were there actually quite a long time and you had several promotions. You started at I'm going to try and get it right, Straumann Group.
Oh, yes.
Straumann.
So Strawman is an interesting company. It's a medical device company. It's a dental implant company. So in short, if you're missing your teeth or need a replacement, it replaces everything down to the root to the, abutment or top of your teeth. So I happen to know a lot about teeth, seen lots of surgery, like videos, lots of gory things. We had a whole dental studio where all of the practitioners and sales folks would come in to actually learn and work, with some of the different tools and technology. What I loved about this job is it was really replacing people's confidence, restoring people's smiles. So again, it's healthcare adjacent, but really helping people, whether again, was it, just making them feel more confident in their everyday life. Maybe they had a medical reason where they needed, some dental replacements. The other thing I loved, I supported the sales force. So that's commercial people selling the products to
Ah,
orthodontists and dentists and oral surgeons. And we also were privileged to have a machine shop floor. So Swiss Precision machine shop. So very clean, very precise. I got to get exposed to a global company in my first role out of college. And we were the North American headquarters. And I would be able to walk the machine shop one day with our first and second shift and see them actually creating these tiny parts that would go into a patient's mouth. And then I would also have the privilege to support the sales force. And so I would be able to do a ride along or a field visit. And those were some of my favorite days where you could literally be walking the floor, seeing something that would end up, in the clinic or, a clinical setting. And then I'd also spend time with our commercial sales reps who are actually selling our products and sharing about the different solutions that the company offered. I started as the HR assistant, and it was really just to support the VP of HR at the time. The It became this endless runway of learning for me, where I was just hired to do some basic administrative things. And when I interviewed with this VP, I really got the sense that he wanted to develop me and meant it. And so that was a big reason that I took that job.
and what were your takeaways that you took from that job to go to the next?
I think the biggest thing is just asking for more, but not asking too soon. And so I think when you think about in being in your career, I see this a lot. And I totally get it. I've been there. I wanted to do everything and anything. I was excited right out of undergrad. But what I needed to do is master some of the basics. And so that meant even just learning how to recruit. So I came up through recruiting. Um, I remember I wanted to recruit for jobs. That was a thing, but I also had some HR administrative things that were my day job. And so I got really good at the things that were assigned to me and showed my boss that I actually had, competence. And again, being early in my career, that's really important, like establishing credibility and showing that the things that you're hired to do, you can do them and you can do them really well. And I remember the receptionist at the company was leaving, she's retiring. And that meant there was going to be a job that was open. And so I asked my boss, I said, hey, I know recruiting isn't in my job, but can I get a shot at trying to fill this job? Little did I know, and even to this day, I think hiring a receptionist or any administrative professional is harder than hiring a chemist sometimes because just the balance, the dynamic, the personality. But anyway, so I asked for this. He actually let me do it because I demonstrated that I actually, was doing well in the job he hired me to do. And that just opened the door to taking on other roles. And so I was able to really come up and build my recruiting chops. I was working with someone who was more senior on the team who helped mentor me, and I took that seriously. He was a lot older than me and a little old school, but I tried to absorb everything he was sharing, even if it might not completely resonate, with me at the time. And this is, gosh, probably 20 years ago now. But the thing I took away is master what you're, asked to be doing, ask for more. And, I think the worst that your boss can say is no. And if they say no, understand what the reasoning is or what else you need to be fulfilling sooner. But by the end, I was supporting the commercial sales force. I also had like multiple different client groups from regulatory to marketing to customer service to even the folks that shipped our products. So I just
Wow.
always took on things that were different. And I really saw everything as a learning opportunity. And some of those roles in recruiting are not glamorous, trying to hire a shipping and receiving clerk or trying to hire someone who's sitting in sales support and fielding calls. Like literally, we had a call center. But I never saw it that way. I saw like these are all these different pieces of a business that would help me understand. And little did I know, like down the line, that really helped as I moved into pharma, which was the role I took next.
Right, which is really you had a foundation of knowledge because you asked.
And I think that's the thing is like you ask, but today it's just like make sure that you're kicking butt at what you're doing now.
Yes. Yes.
I think it's, it's great to have that energy, but you also have to understand like the fundamentals like need to be in a good place before someone's gonna, and that's tough to see sometimes when you're early on, or you just might not have the, career or working experience to realize why they're telling you no. Believe me, my boss told me no sometimes. Like I asked him if I could do something, or I remember at Novartis, I was supporting like a local preclinical safety group in the US, and I saw a lot of other business partners supporting big global groups. And then when there was an opportunity for a global, support role that came up, I wasn't the first one that was asked to do that, and I kind of got passed up for that. Looking back, it makes sense because I just didn't have the broader experience that I
Uh,
needed. But at the time, I remember thinking, man, why can't I just have this big group? Which, again, as I kind of got pushed into a different role, I ended up being able to help build out their immunology group at the time. I helped with a lot of other special projects. And again, the thing I asked for actually wasn't going to help me be a broader, business professional. And so again, the thread commonly for me across each job is the person that hired me at Novartis. She always had my back. She always was looking for broader development areas that would help me. And I really did,
wow,
I listened to her and I took her advice really seriously.
which is fabulous because you were at Novartis for a period of time, weren't you?
Yeah, about 5 years. I came up as, just a business partner supporting a couple groups. And then what I ended up is just, getting this reputation for being a utility player, which when you're in pharma and no matter what group
Ah,
you're in, the swim lanes are pretty clear. And so to be a utility player in a pharma setting, I would be the person they tap for, doing technical compensation decks and like helping to kind of prepare internal communications. Everyone would steal my or want to borrow my templates for how we'd communicate complex pharma initiatives. And then I also ended up, recruiting, which when you're a business partner, the traditional route is you become that business partner, senior business partner, et cetera. And I was the only one I think I knew at the time, I can say this now, that like we needed to build up immunology oncology, and they knew I had the background. And I said yes. So I ended up sitting with the recruiting team for 6 months. I was doing a lot of offers, so recruiting in a pharma setting, versus a biotech. I got to understand like how that works. It is as bureaucratic as you think, but also I got to understand, working with these global academic, heads of the therapeutic areas, the types of talent, and the types of folks that they needed. So I would pinch hit on, if anyone went out on parental leave, like I was usually the first one that they would call. And I got to support a lot of different groups that I never would have supported. So by the end, I can say I worked across oncology, ophthalmology, global discovery chemistry, neuroscience, and then even the lab animal services group. Like I got to help staff roles where people were working in the vivarium. And that was just, again, a total part of the, biopharma chain that, I feel like I don't know how you could get that experience today. I got to do so many things while I was there. And it was a global, organization. So it had multiple sites, multiple teams. And at the time, probably 35 people across the global HR team.
wow,
So,
that's a lot.
and you get to understand, like, I'm an only child. So being kind of one of many, like, that was really good for me. Like, I got to
Yes,
see, like, there's some dynamics. There's, obviously managing up. There is some, I think, level of like, how do you present yourself and how do you communicate? So all of that is something that I learned in being that big global pharma setting.
but again, Kori, it must have been because you really knew what you were doing and you brought your reputation from the first group and you built on it with a very supportive manager who wanted to develop you.
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah.
Yes. My boss, Nancy at Novartis, she's still there today. We're still in touch. Like she came to my like 40th birthday party earlier this year. Like she is just I'd say the bar in terms of like how I think about leading people and what I want to be for others. She really is someone who's selfless and really thinks about the team. And she helped open doors for me at the time, and I really credit a lot of that. I think it was a true like collaboration, and
Oh,
just having that is just priceless, I think,
oh, it's
for your career.
amazing. Just amazing. And then the decision to leave. Why? Your
Yeah,
career was going up, right?
yeah, I wasn't going to leave. Like I had just gotten this, basically like responsibility to support neuroscience and ophthalmology. I always wanted to have that like big business partner role where you have two client groups. They were global groups. So kind of I got to the point where I wanted, and that was like that year. I went through some professional coaching training, which, if you know anything about what that process is like, I did happen to do it, in person. It was like over 100 hours of kind of this intense reflection and learning coaching tools to help support, professionals, executives. One thing led to another, and I got approached by, Relay Therapeutics, which is, a clinical stage oncology company today. I turned it down at first. I said, I just got this like, responsibility in Novartis. I don't know. But then what I did is I called one of my other mentors, and she was at Novartis for a long time. She was retired. I said, hey, got this call from this biotech, but I told them I'm, going to turn them down. I'm not ready to talk. And she's like, why don't you go to lunch and just like learn about it? And I was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. She's like, just go to lunch, learn a little bit more about what they're offering. You haven't even heard what it is. And I was like, okay. So I went to lunch with, the hiring manager at the time. I got to know, the CEO, and I came in for an interview, and I said, gosh, this is super exciting. Like, how could I say no to this? So that was back in 2018. And it was, yeah, I can't imagine working, in anywhere else after Relay. After Relay, it was hard to leave Novartis, but I was really walking towards this biotech opportunity that just really helped, again, take my career to another level in a place that I didn't know was possible.
And that was, a very unusual company, and had a very particular culture, which you had a hand in. So maybe you could just give us a broad sweep on culture and how you develop culture and build cultures.
I think it really starts, or I know it starts at the top. And when I met the CEO at the time, he shared his vision for what type of company we were building, the type of, therapeutics we were developing, and the type of I was hired to build up the team. So I was head of TA, was my first job there. And it was all about recruiting and building and understanding that we really wanted to, push the boundaries, have this differentiated approach where, we could be creative, we could bring our sense of humor, we could bring some levity, and have fun with the process. And I just feel super thankful that I had a lot of runway, probably more than I would, be comfortable sometimes with like in a biotech these days. But, I was literally behind like the social media, like, in the early days, which I know is a thing now, but, almost a decade ago was like still developing in biotech. We got to do this really fun stuff with candidate experience where we'd ask folks like, what's your favorite candy bar on the application question? It was kind of a random question, but if you came in for an interview, a Kit Kat would be waiting for you with,
Oh,
your agenda.
fabulous.
So I found ways to delight candidates because, to your point around culture, that was what I noticed this company had. It felt like summer camp. Everyone was super energized. We were being very stealthy about the approach and the platform. So we really just leveraged everything we could about this great team. And it just continued to build momentum. Like people loved that we were doing something different. They could bring, parts of themselves that probably weren't, at work before, and this safe and, I think really intentional way. And we really sweat, I'd say, every detail, thinking to your point around, or to the point around, having a candy bar waiting, rewriting the offer to make it a little more conversational. So I think we just got to really re-engineer some of the things. Again, I think a lot of those things are maybe dated now, but I just feel thankful that I had the support of the leadership team. And, again, the employees really embraced me. I got to sit next to a computational biologist, a med chemist, and a structural biologist. And those were my like core group. And again, being with scientists and like not feeling like a non-scientist with them, it was just I'll always look back fondly on that experience. And I think feeling accepted at work and seen, and like that they saw me as not just a recruiter, but someone who was helping them, really intentionally build the team to help them execute on, the therapeutics that they're developing.
The last question around this phase would be, what was the difference in experience from pharma to biotech?
It's what exactly what the head of biochemistry told me when I interviewed at Relay. Pharma is a big, big machine. It's like, a tanker. It's, a big cruise ship, whatever. Lots of stuff and lots of perks and lots of things inside, but it does take quite a bit of inertia to kind of move the direction. Being in a biotech is like being in a really sporty like race car where you can go really quick. It's smaller, it's not the same size, but you can make decisions, by the day, by the hour sometimes, and really see things, take off. So I think just the pace is just, sometimes I look at Relay and I can't believe I only worked there nearly 4 years. It felt like maybe, 10 at the time because we did so much. And I mean that in a positive way. Whereas in pharma, it will take quite a lot of time, but it's a different type of work where you have to understand how to socialize things at a global level. Like, how are you going to roll out across multiple cultures, multiple sites, multiple time zones, different regulations in Europe versus UK? And so it's just a much more robust process. And I think both are necessary, skill sets. And I feel super thankful to have spent time inside of pharma, even though I think sometimes people give that place a bad rap, whether it's for bigger macro reasons or just they think, oh, people in pharma don't know, or I think those skill sets that you learn being in a global, like, truly matrix place are actually critical.
It's certainly always the advice that I give to people starting out. Go to pharma, go and learn, right?
Yes.
It's the best place to learn because academia and pharma are two different animals. And so they, a lot of people, oh, biotech, but they don't have the skills necessary, which you talked about in the first segment of this. So thank you for that. And then on to a VC company. How did that come about?
The through line for all of my roles is, incredible managers, incredible leaders. My current manager and the person who helped, bring me to my current role here at 5 a.m. We work together at Relay. And what I love about it is I was just starting to think about what could I do next. We had a lot of progress at Relay, and I felt like I got to do so many different things that aren't even listed on my resume. And when I reached out for some career advice, I reached out to, Deb Palestrant here, and I literally was just asking, like, what could I do? I would love to get a sense. One thing led to another, and she said, "Hey, would you want to come and help us build out the 459 initiative and lead talent and people?" I thought this was just an incredible opportunity. She knew my track record at Relay. She knew what I was capable of. She loved that I had, culture is like a really, something I put a premium on and care deeply about cultivating. And so we were super aligned from a, values perspective. And then the opportunity to kind of scale and just become, even broader than I was in one single company was something that I just felt like it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up because it is not one that comes along every day. And so, yeah, I took the leap of faith. And I have to say, like, you were working with us at the time, at Relay, and I felt like having a sounding board in you was also very helpful to help me make that decision.
Thank you. And now you have all of this work that you're bringing to a new initiative that you've never been in before, which seems to be a theme about you, Kori. Right? It's like, let's go for this thing I don't know because I love to learn. Because learning is a big L comes through with you all the time. So how did that transition go? And what was the role you started with? And now you've been promoted even to a bigger role, which is also a theme with you, Kori.
Yeah, I started off just, to be the head of HR for our early portfolio of seed to Series A companies. I've stayed on with some of them since I started. So I've been working with some for like going on 4 years now, which is kind of cool. And it was really focused on a lot of recruiting, a lot of executive recruiting, a lot of compensation. So traditional kind of HR advisory and senior kind of head of HR duties. I've got to have my hand in at least a dozen companies across the portfolio, either directly launching, building out teams. And so, to your point, I like being in situations where there's some discomfort because I know that that means I'm stretching and it's like, something I haven't done before. I think sometimes, and I know in my career, it's easy to do the things that are, you're good at. And it feels good to keep doing those things. But that isn't going to be the thing that gets you the broader role, which I think most young people are excited about and wanting lots of growth and having, that trajectory. So I think the takeaway for me is, what is something that you can do? Maybe it's in your day to day, or if it's like something you're driving towards, if you're making a career decision, is there an element of discomfort and to lean into that? And that's so counterintuitive, but the things that have been really painful for me over the years, and I mean that in a good way, like it's this notion of like type 2 fun that I talk about sometimes. It's like running a marathon is kind of like type 2 fun. Like it's like super hard, but at the end, you're like, oh gosh, like that was awesome. So I would say, if you're early in your career, try to find more of those experiences that are a healthy amount of stretch, because that's what's going to get you to the ultimate like next step or career progression that I think a lot of people are wondering, how do they do that? And the only way you do that is by doing things that are uncomfortable. I try to tell my kids that right now, but it's very difficult because they're little.
They'll learn. They'll learn. They have you as the model. They'll learn. They will.
Um, yeah, and I think your other question, this role today, I think the one thing that I've realized is like I think sometimes you want to chase like that next role and like, kind of you think that you have to go somewhere else or you get enticed by, someone recruiting you away. And I think that's happened to all of us, that have been working for some times. You get the calls from recruiters, maybe not as often as these days. This market is very, very tough. But I think for me, anytime I have, been asked, like, are you open to moving since I've been at 5 a.m.? The answer is always no, because I want to stay the course and I want to have, really this long lasting like career within venture, within working across startups. And I don't take for granted like how many opportunities I've had and how many there probably still are that I'm not even aware of. And I did that by sticking in one place. And so because I've been around here, it'll be 5 years in the spring. We've had, you know, companies come and go. We've had, changes in leadership, even within, some of our companies, our firm. But there's an opportunity for me to do HR for 5 a.m. And so that came up, over the summer. I was excited to learn more about venture and what it's like to actually kind of, be the HR leader within, a venture firm. And so that's something I've been working on since earlier this year. And I think those things only happen if you prove yourself, to my point about, early careers. Like I showed them, gosh, like I can do a lot across your portfolio. And it became kind of a no-brainer for us to come to the decision, like, all right, let's have you take on some, responsibilities for, actually our team. And so again, I think just staying the course, getting good, showing that you're excellent at certain things, a healthy amount of stretch, like that's to me the recipe. Plus, if you can find these like leaders that will support you and really help put you in, have your back is something that's super important to me and that are sure of themselves. Those are the things that will help you go, the distance.
Right. And I think, from your perspective, I think your managers developed you because they saw your potential, because you put up your hand for anything and everything. And people
Yeah.
do that, it's like jumping into the deep end of the pool. And the learning that takes place is exponential, whether it's positive or negative, right? The learning is exponential.
And I think it's just that balance where you always want to be like the person that'll ask for more, but you want to make sure that you've got, your day job or whatever your core responsibilities are. Like the house has to be in order. And I think that's the only way that you get to have these stretch assignments. And so sometimes you might not be able to like be asking for more. There's definitely times in my life, whether it's personally or seasons, things that are going on or just the nature of the business. But when I can lean into that, oh gosh, like I'd love to be involved in this initiative. And maybe it's not leading it, maybe it's shadowing, maybe it's, asking for a debrief, like what was your thought process around that? There's so many things that are great for your development. We all think that we have to go to a conference. We think we have to be having these like very formal things. Whereas if you step back and really do some self-reflection week to week, month to month, there's a number of things that are helping contribute. And I think that's the other thing I would, recommend for folks early in careers. Just take stock of what you're, kind of learning on a, week to month basis, because there's actually a lot that's going on there. And I think you also feel more fulfilled when you reflect on the progress that you're making, which is hard to see, day to day.
It's fabulous. It's just fabulous. And so my very last question would be the new generation, Kori, the younger generation. I work a lot with that generation and I understand them completely. It took me a year and a half, and I'm about to do some workshops on training managers because, however, what I would be curious about is the interviewing and the decision making around bringing in a younger generation that doesn't have the same values necessarily or the same culture that the company that they're joining.
So what's kind of what to do with
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
I think the piece around values is a good point. I think having a shared value is really important. And so that can look different. It doesn't mean it has to be exactly what, maybe if you're part of like Gen Z or the younger like workforce, doesn't mean that you're going to map that exactly, but caring about, I think one, being in our industry, like wanting to be here for patients, I think that's critical in bringing that energy every day. Two, thinking about, you know, the type of work you're doing and like just the craftsmanship that you bring to that and like doing, I think there are different elements and different values. If you care about the environment and like corporate responsibility, there's certainly organizations where you can lean into that. So I think there are different ways that you can try and map it. It just may not look exactly like it does, but you can find more similarities than you probably think there are. And I think that in general has also helped me, and reminding myself, like, we're probably have a lot more in common than we think. And so, like, let's just do a double take and see what's there.
perfect. Because I agree with you. A lot more common, a lot more in common than what people think. Any final words of advice to the audience tonight?
No, it's just been lovely just to chat through things. I think words of advice, I always try and think about, every interaction that you're having, whether it's an interview or like just coming in for the day. Like if you're at a job or you're entering the workforce and maybe you don't like, you're not thrilled with the culture, or you don't like the way something is, or you've been working so like you have the power to change that. And we've all had days like that. So sometimes I think the best thing, and I've heard this in a podcast I've heard before, is like you have to get really good at like, being able to move through things or be in a good mood, even if there's no reason to be in a good mood. And so I think it's a version of resilience. But I think the other piece, if you're early in your career, you may not think you have so much influence, but we're in the season of talent and calibration sessions. And some of my favorite things to hear are how the younger generation and our junior talent actually have a really outsized impact on the culture, the work, and just thinking about what their trajectory could look like. So I think, you may think you're just, early in career, just started your job, you're on the precipice of that. But you actually have a lot more impact and power than you think. And I think you're only kind of limited by your own tenacity in some ways. So I feel like I'm optimistic about this. And I know it's hard to feel that way in this market. But I think just resilience and kind of sticking to, your values, will help, build your career.
I totally agree. And this market, although, I had somebody interview me a couple of weeks back and they wanted to know about the market. And I said, the rest of the country, not so much. But I said, what I found in this area, it takes 6 months.
It's a process. Yeah. And I
It's
think
a
you have to
process.
expect that.
And people are hiring for the skills. They're not hiring to train you. There are too many people on the street that are already trained. So
You also have to be
value.
excellent, yeah, at communicating. Like interpersonal
Yes.
skills are going to be the differentiator. And so practicing, whether it's with a friend, the mirror, like recording yourself, like getting confident in your pitch, what you bring, that is going to give you an upper edge every time. And I've definitely told that to not only junior folks, but even people that are pretty experienced.
Exactly. Well, Kori, thank you so incredibly much. This was so helpful and really informative to our audience. So I can't thank you enough.
Thanks,
And
Sarah.
okay, take care.